Hi everyone, today I'm going to talk about how feminism ruined families, the end of Genesis. And here I'm going to read you a part of Genesis. This is from the King James Version. And Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, and cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed." And then Genesis 3:20, "And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living." So that's how the Bible describes women and how women came about. And actually what Eve's name means is the mother of all living, so that women were supposed to be a helper to man, made out of man, and then mothers. So this is Aaron Russo. And I'm putting him in here because he was like a Hollywood insider. He was an American entertainment businessman, film producer, and director. He was also a political activist, and he was a Primetime Emmy Award winner. So he was pretty high up in the entertainment industry. And here's what he had to say about feminism.
The house one night, and we were talking, and he started laughing. He said, "Aaron, what do you think women's liberation was about?" And I said, I had pretty conventional thinking about it at that point. I said, I think it's about women having the right to work, getting equal pay with men, just like they won the right to vote, you know? And he started to laugh. He said, "You're an idiot." And I said, "Why am I an idiot?" He said, let me tell you what that was about. We, the Rockefellers, funded that. We funded women's lib, you know? And we're the ones who got all over the newspapers and television, the Rockefeller Foundation. He says, and you want to know why? He says, there were two primary reasons. And they were, one reason was we couldn't tax half the population before women's lib. And the second reason was, now we get the kids in school at an early age. We can indoctrinate the kids how to think. It breaks up the family. The kids start looking at the state as the family, as the school, as the officials, as their family, not as the parents teaching them. And so those are the two primary reasons for women's lib, which I thought up to that point was a noble thing. You know, when I saw their intentions behind it, where they were coming from when they created it, the thought of it, I saw the evil behind what I thought was a noble venture.
So there you have Aaron Russo telling him what him and one of the Rockefellers had discussed. And so it's pretty eye-opening that, you know, he had no idea, and most people have no idea, that feminism wasn't a grassroots movement by women that were dissatisfied in being in the home. It was a movement by the moneyed elite to try to get women out of their home. So the way that they accomplished this was using people like Gloria Steinem, who was quoted as saying, "The first problem for all of us, men and women, is not to learn, but to unlearn." And unlearning God's word, our natural God-given instincts. So it was a coordinated attack on the traditional family. So the Rockefeller Foundation used people like Gloria Steinem, Betty Friedan, and editorials like MS Magazine as puppets to influence an entire generation of women to abandon the home in exchange for the workplace, as if spending your time working for a wage is somehow more valuable than spending your time taking care of your family. So here are feminism's corporate benefactors. So this is from OccidentVicta.com, and it says the University of Michigan's background information on the Women's Study Program admits to receiving funding from the National Science Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Russell Sage Foundation, the National Institute of Education, the National Endowment of the Humanities. And it also says that the University of Hawaii admitted that it received a prestigious 3-year Rockefeller grant for the Gender Globalization in Asia and the Pacific program. And the Susan B. Anthony Institute for Gender and Women's Studies also has admitted to receiving Rockefeller money. So this is a strategic plan to influence culture and to change people's opinions. So let's see, feminism pushed women out of the home. So Simone de Beauvoir admitted in 1975 She said no woman should be authorized to stay at home and raise her children. Women should not have that choice, because if there is such a choice, too many women will make that one. So feminism pushed women out of their home by convincing women that education and career was more fulfilling than love, marriage, and motherhood, and making women feel as though having a career is the only path to a successful life, stigmatized women who wanted to pursue marriage and a family. And so how did they convince women that they didn't want to do what they naturally wanted to do? They now wanted to go out in the workforce and become men. They told women that they could have it all. So here we have Helen Gurley Brown, her book Having It All, Love, Success, Sex, and Money. And they also used a slew of articles and books from the 1960s through the 1980s to convince women that they can have it all. And nowadays, here's a recent article from the Huffington Post written by Amy Westervelt. She says having it all kind of sucks. So this is a direct quote from her article. She said, "Here's what I think is going on. This whole having it all business has been grossly misinterpreted by our society at large. The purpose of all that bra burning back in the 60s was to give women choices. Doing it all at the same time was never the idea. By that definition, single working moms have been having it all for ages, and yet society doesn't hold the single working mom up as the goal for women everywhere. No, that's just what happens when you're poor and you have no choice. Except actually that's what happens to all but the very, very rich when you encourage women to work and have children, but don't change any other part of the world that they live in." And so what feminism really did was transfer the dependence from women's husband to the state. So I got this from Occident Invicta's website, and it stated that women aren't entirely economically independent. Feminists have just shifted their dependency away from husbands and family and into the state. So the examples they use are affirmative action legislature, family laws that favor women, alimony, and child support. Also, it states that women aren't any less subservient today. Feminists have just shifted their subservience away from husbands and families and onto the corporate elite through fashion, lifestyle, and consumption trends. And then lastly, women aren't any less concerned with security today. Feminists have just shifted that need away from men and into the state, and the example they use is rape paranoia. And then this is the really sad part. Now fewer than half of U.S. children live in a traditional family. So this is from the Pew Research Center, and they state that fewer than half, 46% of U.S. kids younger than 18 years of age, are living in a home with two married heterosexual parents in their first marriage. This is a marked change from 1960, when 73% of children fit this description, and 1980, when 61% did. And then here's a graph of how the American family has changed since 1960. Here you can see in 1960, 73% of kids lived with two married parents in their first marriage. Then in 1980, it dropped to 61%. Then in 2013, it dropped to 46%. And then down here, this is now single parents. Oops, that's moved to 34%. So that's a huge increase. And then finally, comparing children of divorced parents to children with married parents. So children from divorced parents, from divorced homes suffer academically. They experience high levels of behavioral problems. Their grades suffer, and they are less likely to graduate from high school. Kids whose parents divorce are substantially more likely to be incarcerated for committing a crime as a juvenile. And because the custodial parent's income drops substantially after a divorce, children in divorced homes are almost 5 times more likely to live in poverty than children with married parents. And teens from divorced homes are much more likely to engage in drug and alcohol use, as well as sexual intercourse, than those from intact families. So as you can see, this feminist movement that Aaron Russo talked about from the Rockefeller family, they've really succeeded. They've really succeeded in tearing the family apart. And so that's all I wanted to talk about today, that feminism has ruined families and is the end of Genesis.